SYS presents Adventures in Online Education.
Welcome, online educators. You're listening to SYS Presents Adventures in Online Education. I'm your host, Natalie Conway. Thanks for being here. If you're new to the podcast, first off, welcome. I'm really glad you're here. You're going to want to head over to aoepodcast.org and enter your info at the bottom of the page to start receiving the AOE newsletter. It is a little piece of positivity for your inbox, from me to you. Returning listeners, I appreciate you so much. Thanks for tuning in again. Let's get to it. On today's episode of Adventures in Online Education, I have the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Matt Rhodes. He was my first friend on Twitter. Yay! Matt is an innovator and expert in integrating EdTech and research-based instructional strategies to amplify student learning. He currently is an instructional leader and EdTech integrationist for a consortium of adult schools. He spent his prior years, like me, in special education in K-12. He's also worked as a technology coach. Matt is a lecturer of education technology, K-12 teacher candidate supervisor, author, podcaster, and educational consultant. He's everywhere in education, and he's collaborated with many brilliant educators. Today, he and I talk about his new book, Navigating the Toggled Term, and the future of online education. So, you ready? Let's learn something new. I am so excited for you all to meet Dr. Matt Rhodes today. Thank you so much for being on the podcast and coming to talk with me.
Yeah, it's been fun getting to know you over the last couple years now, I feel like, and just keeping up with everything that you've been up to and all the amazing work. So it's great just to sit down with you again and talk education with you.
Thank you. I know if those of you listening don't know, Matt was my first Twitter friend. So this is big to finally have a chance to interview him and get to speak one-on-one outside of the realm of social media. We both have kind of gone through shifts in our careers over the past couple of years too, which is really fun to watch. You've shifted from teaching kids to teaching adults. How is that going?
Oh my gosh, it's a completely different scenario. There's challenges because adults definitely have a lot more responsibilities than children because they have their careers and they may even
Indeed.
have their own families. But at the same time, it's a whole different form of learners because the adults, they sign up and they want to, go through the program and be a part of the program versus, compulsory education. So it's definitely a different group of learners that we're working with, but it's fun always walking in my role, going into like a nursing class, a coding class, or ESL class, or business technology class, and essentially seeing all this different types of learning going on, and I'm just learning along the way because it's just so
Hmm.
much new stuff for me, and incorporating the EdTech as well as the pedagogy has been really cool, and working with the teachers and the students. So it's been an interesting and good transition for me.
I bet it's a new set of challenges for sure, but also a new set of rewards comes with that, right?
It is, yeah, and especially when you go in, and I do like a lot of co-teaching as part of my coaching. Working one-on-one with the students and getting to build those relationships. For example, some of our students didn't even have a really truly email address, and we got them an email address and teaching them how to use email for educational purposes. And you could see in their faces it's pretty liberating. So getting those experiences or teaching them how to build something and create something through a lot of different tools that we use has been really rewarding as well. And the students have been very grateful and thankful. So it's been really fun working with them in that process, and the teachers as well. So it's been really just getting into classrooms and doing a lot of coaching with teachers and working with students. So that's been, super fun. I'm sure a lot of your listeners enjoy doing that.
Absolutely. I think as educators, we are always collaborators too. So we're always looking to learn from someone else or to share something that we've learned with another peer. And it's so neat that you get to work with adults now. You're always collaborating. You're always working with adults in education along with students. Recently, you published a book entitled Navigating the Toggled Term, a guide for K-12 classroom and school leaders, which is super cool. I know you got to collaborate with teachers from around the world on this project. What did you learn from writing this book?
Well, it was definitely a project that began in about April of 2020. And I wrote one book before I wrote this one, which was kind of the precursor. Uh, but I learned a lot about what's going on in education, what's going on in the corners of the United States, or what's going on in Canada, or what's going on in Europe or in
Mm.
Asia, and just seeing the vast differences of how people are handling instruction and leadership. And that really got me to really want to sit down and look at what's working for people and what does the research say and how can we take the situations where what was working for people and students and taking the research as well and aligning it with it. And I wanted to create that guide to help schools, teachers, and school leaders to really, you know, put their schools in the position to be successful, to be able to move between the challenges that we're going through right now with, COVID, as well as teacher shortages and social emotional learning, as well as, moving around and avoiding burnout for teachers, as well as instructional strategies and integrating tech. I mean, I try to include as much as possible to really be that guide to help um, teachers and school leaders navigate the present as well as the future. So it's packed full of things, and I think it's with a lot of what was working for people and what is continuing to work for educators around the world in the schools and classrooms that are thriving.
Absolutely. And there's so much going on across the country, across the globe. And I love that you took that and not only said, okay, what's happening, but what is working? What's going well? What have we researched that's telling us this is a sound practice now? And I think it's really valuable that teachers get solid information from fellow teachers. And that's exactly what you've done with your book is given,
Hmm.
like you said, you've cast a wide net. There's a lot of information in there. And I think educators at different levels will find what it is they're looking for. And as well as school leaders, I think what you said about the ideas around SEL and teacher burnout and shortages of educators, that's all really important, and that's at the forefront of a lot of leaders' minds right now as well. So, what kind of nuggets of wisdom do we have from these educators around the world? Is there anything you'd willing to share?
Yeah,
Kind of tease
so
this book a
I
little?
I think that there's a number of points. So I think that the schools that are succeeding right now have the more flexible instructional models and leadership models. And I talk about how schools, and I've developed a framework that relates to this reality that's happening, is called the toggle term instructional model, along with integrating Michael Fullen and Joanne Quinn's framework called the coherence framework. Um, so what these two frameworks do is that the toggle term instructional model with what we call the online instructional infrastructure, which is having an LMS, an SIS, a video conferencing tool, a number of engagement and assessment tools, as well as content creation tools. Having that infrastructure in place and having a basic to advanced knowledge of how to utilize those types of tools within the being in person or online allows for you to move between pretty seamlessly. And there's a number of instructional strategies that align with being able to be successful in using those tools in person as well as in online. And then for the coherence framework is that what it does is it creates a flexible framework where essentially leaders and teacher leaders are focused on 2 to 3 things for the school year goals that relate to instruction.
Mhm.
And then essentially, we want to create opportunities for teachers to be creative So we need to offer rewards for instructional risk taking, and also the school leaders need to take into account that we need to create collaborative cultures. So having one or two people on your
Yes.
team that are those pioneers and strategically putting them there, regardless of the content or grade level, is needed so that what you can do is you can have those various teams essentially provide a PD for the rest of the school or organization each and every week, and it can be recorded. So essentially, everyone has a rotating, I call it rotating PLC training, and and essentially, it shows what people are doing across the school that relate to your instructional goals, and it creates that buy-in over time, especially when you strategically have placed those pioneers and enthusiasts on those teams. So all that
Yes.
together hopefully creates schools that are resilient and teachers that are resilient and cultures that are flexible and are moldable to the circumstances that we're currently in right now with where education currently is at with COVID and teacher shortages as well as just the climate in the communities surrounding schools.
Absolutely, and I really like that idea of teachers teaching other teachers, the teach the teacher model or train the trainer thing, and
Hmm.
I think that goes hand in hand with peer observations, it goes hand in hand with professional learning communities, all of that. Schools are definitely working to adapt continuously, I think, and many schools developed their online programs because of COVID, and now as we are, at least in the certain areas of the US, loosening restrictions a bit, now schools have to choose whether they're going to keep their online options or not, and at what levels and what they'll do with them. If a school district is considering whether or not to invest more capital in their online program, what advice would you give them based on what you've learned and based on your
Yeah.
experiences?
I would say that Pandora's box has been opened, and if you're not going to start riding the online academy train as a district, then you could be putting yourself in a disadvantage, and you could be losing enrollment based on not providing that
Yeah.
option. So there's a need for each and every district to create a robust online academy model, not an online academy where it's essentially, it's packet oriented or something like that. We want it to be robust instruction where it's engaging, where it's, effective online instruction, and people that sign up for that online academy, you want to create that buy-in on both sides, and having that robust academy will help districts, especially meet the needs of a lot of their populations. And there is now, I believe, about 15 to 25% of all students within a district may, and their families may be interested in being a part of these online academies. And if you are
Definitely.
not doing it now, creating these programs, then you could be losing up to 15 to 25% by 2025 to 2028. Um, and that, if your state is an attendance funding state where, having students in a seat gives you that money to operate your district and schools, then it's something to really consider because that enrollment could go down as a result of not providing options that meet the needs of your community and students. And I believe that the online academy is going to be here to stay, and it will continue to grow in terms of its popularity, especially when more results are shown in terms of their effectiveness. I know that
Yes.
we'll talk about this in a moment, that over the last 18 months, especially the first year, we saw a lot of online, or what they call it, remote options, and those are essentially were emergency options. And you may have not
Right.
seen the best forms of instruction taking place because they were thrown together. It was like building the airplane as it was flying, and there's ways at which you can train teachers and provide really solid instructional design to support the learners for all grade levels for those academies. So I think that,
Yes.
we're on the precipice of this becoming more and more prevalent, and COVID was basically the match that started lighting up the flame more.
Absolutely. I mean, online schools have been around for so long, and people are always surprised to hear that. If I tell them, "Oh, I've been online for 7 years," or however long, "What? How?" That's a thing. Um, there's definitely a difference in just doing it and doing it well, and I like your emphasis on a robust online academy, because if you just offer that canned kind of fully asynchronous program, that's not gonna keep students and families for very long. Or if it does, they're not necessarily successful in my experience in those kinds of programs. So you really have to create something that is purposeful, that is teacher designed, that follows a framework. And yeah, it really, like you said before, uses specific platforms and uses them well so that teachers are doing the most effective job they can in communicating and connecting with students in the online world, and that students and families can engage right back. And it's easy and it's seamless, or at the very least, easy to learn and user friendly. So, we're going to take a quick commercial break. And when we come back, we're going to talk more about that difference between remote teaching, the band aid, and a fully robust online program. So, stick with us. What's the one thing all online schools and programs struggle with? Student engagement and the ability to truly personalize interventions. How do we solve those problems? With the use of Admin Dash, a brand new Canvas LTI tool from SYS Education. Admin Dash allows online teachers to see a risk assessment score that proactively identifies students who may need more specialized attention or intervention, and offers a communication log that provides an outlet for complete transparency among teachers, admin, students, and families. At just 99 cents per student per year, and with no minimum price and no fees, you can't afford to not use Admin Dash. For more information about Admin Dash, contact sales at syseducation.org and start connecting proactively with your online learners. All right, welcome back, online learners and educators. Before the break, we started kind of talking about the difference between remote learning and in a purposeful online school or online teaching. They are so different. I've talked about it a lot on the podcast in the past. Matt, what do you see as the key difference there? And why do those differences matter right now?
So the key differences is that when it's intentionally designed, online instruction versus trying to emulate what traditional in-person looks like when you're online. I think that those are two major facets that we need to really first take into consideration, right? For example, if you're in secondary school and or even elementary, for example, there's no reason for you to be synchronous all day. Why would you be synchronous? Or, for example, think about when you do independent practice. That could be something where you could have an asynchronous moment in the day, maybe an hour and a half, and you could be available via office hours essentially, or there's a link that students press and they can go. Or, I mean, you could even while if you are in a system where they would require the synchronous to be on, you could essentially just tell the students to go in and do a task, um, and you can be there for questions in a breakout room and they can attend. And
Mhm.
you could, for example, have something like Go Guardian up where you can see the student screens and you can be monitoring it that way and seeing what they're working on and ensuring they're making progress in whatever you're trying to do. So I think that that's the really big thing is differentiating. You know, being online should not emulate being in person. And sometimes
Yes.
I feel like if you are intentional with your design, is that you may be able to actually get through more instruction and content online. And what I like to tell people is that for online instruction is that we can incorporate essentially any instructional model into online learning. So for example, if you want to do project-based learning, you could put it in online. You could do station rotation online. You can do what we call flipped classroom online. You could do what we call inside out, which is primary asynchronous and just meeting only for an hour, synchronous each day. It really just depends on what is going to meet your students' needs, the community's needs, as well as your instructional needs. You can incorporate many different models that work within online settings. And what I tend to tell teachers is one of the best practices for online instruction is to really use your synchronous instruction to collaborate, chunk instruction, as well as build community and SEL. And then you can utilize a lot of your asynchronous to basically front load instruction as well as provide opportunities for students to really process the content you want them to um, progress through, and then possibly during some of the synchronous moments to begin applying it with another person before they apply it asynchronously again for finishing that final product for that specific lesson or unit or whatever you're working on. And the last thing I want to mention is assessment. And assessment
Mm.
doesn't necessarily, and this goes in general for assessment, is that assessment may be a lot of different things. And traditional multiple choice assessment doesn't necessarily work very well online or in person anymore because you can Google the
Right.
answer, right? Or I mean, you could have a platform where you lock everyone's screen and that can work. But I think that what you want your students to do is to build something or create something that demonstrates what they've learned. So whether that is, for example, you have the students create a infographic or do a short little student-led podcast or have them create a
Hmm.
video that incorporates what the content is about, or it could be multimodal where they write a short one page or paragraph and then they create some sort of graphic that relates to. We want to provide these options for students. I mean, you can use formative assessment, for example, like Pear Deck or Nearpod are great for formative
Hmm.
assessment for synchronous or asynchronous, where you can see the students' responses in real time and then provide that critical, feedback to them individually or the whole class. So I generally feel that for online learning, the assessment piece, formative assessment for really providing that feedback, and then allowing the students for more of that summative assessment to create something and demonstrate their learning in a variety of different ways. And online, I think, allows for you to have those options.
Yes. I think online gives you a lot of flexibility, and sometimes it can be almost paralyzing the number of choices and options you have because it's
Yes, it does.
different. It's different from being in person. But I really like what you were saying about how we're measuring learning and the amount of time a student needs to be in front of a screen or live with you. We're not trying to recreate the physical classroom in an online platform. And I think this is probably why the Twitter algorithm knew that we would be friends. We agree on so many things just in terms of how we think about education and what we think it should be or can be. And, we don't want to measure seat time. We want to measure learning. And that's one of the things that we really believe strongly in. And just having kids online X number of hours for the purpose of having them online X number of hours, it doesn't work. And it's not purposeful. If we have a certain approach that we've taken or a model, like you were saying, there's so many models you can apply in the online setting and they all can work very well. There is not one best practice. There are a number of sound practices that we can use right now. And if you're doing that, you're going to measure learning. You're not going to measure seat time. And you can have those accountability measures for sure. Like I had never used Go Guardian before, so I'm going to go check that out. But even in something like Pear Deck, you can see what all the students are doing, or whiteboard.fi. You can see what kids are doing
Hmm.
in real time. And so if you need that, then you have it. That's okay. But then also, we can move away from multiple choice tests and we can move away from that testing scenario for assessing, and we can be constantly assessing and we can be constantly tweaking and
Exactly.
responding and more universally designing for our students. So it's not just handing over a packet or it's not just clicking go on a program. It is really getting to know students and families and working with them and figuring out how we're going to connect with them to make some learning happen. So it's just so cool to hear you talk about all these things that I'm passionate about. I know my team is too, and that we teach other teachers how to do as well. Like, how do we do project based online? How do we engage kids in a flipped class model? All of that. It's really exciting work once you dive into it, and it makes you realize how different genuine, robust online teaching is from the Band-Aid of just remote learning. And I think you're right. If
Def-
such a huge
Definitely.
percentage of kids are going to go online in the coming years or stay online, then I think schools want to invest in that.
Yeah, no, definitely. And a few things that I wanted to mention before we move on is that I think one of the biggest two themes that we can get from online learning is that the technology is not the driver. It's the strategy and instructional model that you
Yeah.
want to utilize. And then also for online learning is that it may seem at first like it's a lot of heavy lifting, and that is true. But once you've developed a lot of your systems and the basically the infrastructure for your class, once that's built, then it's a lot less work than you think in terms of putting it together. And you're gonna have to be in the mode of a content creator, but if you build it over time, you're gonna have a ton of content, and you just reuse it and tweak it and refine it as you go. And then the last thing I want to talk about is if you're interested in looking at a variety of different strategies that can meet students' needs at a variety of different grade levels, from kindergarten all the way up to adult learners. There's a great tool called Digital Promises Learner Variability Tool, which provides you with some of the factors that are affecting learners for those various age groups, from cognitive to social emotional to self-regulation and all those things. And then it provides you a series of strategies that relate to meeting those needs. And you can see the research, you can see an example. They tend to integrate technology often, and then there's a series of other publications that relate to it. So it's a great toolkit for you to check out if you haven't already.
Awesome. Yes, we'll have links in the show notes to a lot of what we've talked about today on the podcast so that teachers can dive in further if they're interested. Awesome. Matt, I have one more question for you if you're game. I have been asking everyone this season who their favorite teacher as a kiddo was. Teachers have just such a positive impact on us and sometimes a really deep impact. And I'm curious what teachers from your past have shaped the Matt you are today.
I think, I mean, I'm going to list a number of names, and they all come from various stages of my educational career and life. But
Awesome.
what I have come to think about and reflect about is that the teachers that had the most impact on me built a relationship with me and believed in me and invested that additional time in me, asked me how things were going, or spent time with me after school tutoring me, or just really trying to get to know me and trying to put forth their best effort to support me. So in elementary it was Miss Kaiserman, who was my fourth grade teacher. Middle school was Miss
Hmm.
Alford, who was my social studies teacher. Then in high school I had Mr. Laporte, who was my AP Euro and AP Art History teacher, and then Mr. Garrison, who was my biology and AP Environmental Science. Then in college for my undergrad, Dr. Lupo, who was one of my political science professors, and then for my doctoral degree, I had Dr. Karj, who I continue to work with and who's one of my mentors. Um, so each and every one of
Awesome.
them, did that for me. And that's why I remember them the most, I think. And I remember a lot from their classes and the lessons that they've taught me.
It's so true. It might be cliche, but it's so true that we really remember how people made us feel. Not even
Yes.
necessarily the content, the standards they taught us, right? But we remember how they made us feel. And to feel like a teacher wanted to connect with you and wanted to get to know you and really cared. That's awesome. Yes. And to have so many of them in your life is fantastic. That is so cool. Dr. Matt Rhodes, thank you so much for being with me today. If listeners want to get in touch with you, if they want to find out more about your book or the work that you're doing, how can they find you?
Yeah, you can find me through a variety of different ways. So you can go to my website, www.matthewrhodes.com, and that directs you to all my publications, including Navigating the Toggle Term, as well as my blog and podcast, Navigating Education, the podcast. And you can follow me on Twitter at Matt Rhodes 1990, as well as on Instagram at Dr. Rhodes EDU. And then you can obviously find me on Twitter, but on LinkedIn by just writing in my name, and you can connect with me there. I try and post blog posts and podcasts each and every week, including to all my other publications and projects I'm working on. So there's definitely a lot there for you if you're interested in all that we were talking about today.
That's awesome. You are always going in 18 different directions, and I don't know how you do it, and you do it really well. So keep up the good work, because we're all benefiting from your research and your collaboration. So it's really a pleasure learning from you and talking with you. Thanks again for being here today.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of SYS Presents Adventures in Online Education. Special thanks to my guest today, Dr. Matt Rhodes. Today we learned that online education is here to stay, and that there are certain frameworks we can use that truly make a positive impact on students' experiences in online schools. Thanks again for listening. If you liked what you heard today, please hit subscribe and give us a rating. On Twitter, you can follow me, Natalie Conway, at AOE Natalie, and the show at SYS Presents. If you're interested in finding out more about SYS education, head to syseducation.org. This podcast wouldn't be possible without our amazing team at SYS Education, including our awesome sound engineers, Natalie Farrell and Matt Duran, and our talented producer, Bo Neal. Thanks for listening, and remember, we can learn new things.